So if you're one of those people out there that just dreams about becoming a full-time freelancer, maybe you have a 9 to 5 right now, or maybe you're just bouncing between gig jobs and you really want more of a actual freelancing situation. Maybe you dream about having the time freedom or the income ceiling on your time removed. Then this video is all about that. It's something that Jessica and I have both done, and it's one of the most rewarding things that we've ever done in our lives. So if you know that you have what it takes to become a full-time freelancer, but you haven't kind of figured out exactly what to do, this video is all about that. We're going to go over how we escaped our 9 to 5s and then how we actually transitioned into becoming successful freelancers. So before we get into that though, we just want to say a quick thank you to everyone that's been tuning into these podcasts. This is something that Jessica and I started, we were getting no views, and it's so cool to see people actually watching our content, leaving comments, and sort of building a little community of ours, the Freelance Pros community. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed and has sent our videos to your friends and family. We really appreciate it, and we can't wait to see where this goes into the future. All right, so let's start with step one. And when we think about our journeys becoming full-time freelancers, the first step is actually, what do you enjoy doing? And that sounds kind of basic and kind of obvious, but a lot of people actually miss this step. They go right into, what can I do that makes me money? The problem with taking that approach is you have to enjoy doing something before you can become very good at it. So if you decide to go down a path or chase a shiny object because it might pay a lot of money, you're actually not going to get yourself in the top 20% of that specialty if you don't enjoy doing it. So, step one, what do you actually enjoy doing? And what can you pursue and get really good at because you enjoy doing it?
And I want to chime in a little bit for those of you who are like, well, I don't really enjoy my craft, or I don't really enjoy what I'm actually doing, but you enjoy maybe some other aspects of it. Like for me, when I was first starting out, I did start in public relations, right? But let's be honest, I wasn't fantasizing or daydreaming about placing PR articles for my clients, right? But I loved the concept of freelancing, loved the freedom, loved the flexibility, loved the challenge, and I loved client relationships. I loved being able to show up to a client, to provide value, to earn that respect, to earn that trust. And so those were stronger motivators for me. And I really enjoyed those aspects of freelancing, probably even a little bit more so than the actual skill itself.
All right, so if we go back to the beginning of my career, I would call that right as I graduated college. I knew what I enjoyed doing, and I knew that if I continued at it, I was actually naturally skilled at this skill, which was video production. I had done it in my younger years, and then I had rediscovered it in college, and I knew I actually did have a natural talent for video production. So I had step one covered, but when I graduated college, I had the typical naive college graduate problem that a lot of people have, which is they have an overinflated sense of the value and the craftsmanship of their portfolio. So I graduated a year early, and I actually had put together a portfolio during my time in college, but I thought that I was at a level that could support a full-time freelance situation directly out of college. And I had an agreement with my dad. He said, I know you graduated a year early, so I'm going to let you live with me for 1 year, which would have been your senior year of college, and you can try out this freelancing thing. And I was so excited. I was so ready to start making real money, start working with awesome clients right out of college. And over that year that I had, I quickly realized that my portfolio and my skill set was not nearly at a level that would support a full-time freelance income. So I kind of spun my wheels for a year. I was experimenting, I was sending out mailers at one point, trying to win clients. I was doing everything I could, all the tricks to, I was sending LinkedIn messages, I was sending cold emails. I was doing everything that you're supposed to do to bring work to you as a freelancer, but it wasn't working. And the reason it wasn't working was because my portfolio was simply not good enough at that point. So it took me a year to realize that I wasn't ready to be a full-time freelancer, and it was really painful to learn that lesson, but at the end of that year, my dad said, "Okay, time's up. I'm kicking you out. You now have to support yourself," and I was basically forced to get my first job. So, I had a decision to make. I failed at freelancing, and now I have to get a full-time job. What do I do for my first job? And I thought really hard about it, and I made sure that my first job was going to have leverage and was going to actually move me forward into a future that I could be a full-time freelancer. And so I got a job at a very small digital agency, and it was the best decision I ever made because it was a small company, meaning I had a lot of creative control over the work that I did, but obviously I had a income that I could support myself with, a salary that I could support myself with. And I think that would be the first lesson for those of you who are trying to transition into full time work. You need to make sure that your full time job is actually improving your freelancing prospects in some way. And that is going to actually make it so you're not wasting 8 hours a day on your job and not getting any return or leverage that's going to improve your freelancing work. So, Jessica, is that kind of the path that you took?
So my story is a little bit different. So when I graduated college, I got my first big girl corporate job, and I got a job at a large public relations firm. And it was all fine and good for the first year, and then I started itching. I started itching for more of a challenge. I got honestly kind of bored, right? When you work at these large corporations, your job is to do one thing really well and specialize in that. So after about a year in, I started getting bored. I started getting kind of antsy and I wanted to do more. I wanted more of a challenge. I wanted to have my hand in different departments and I didn't want to do just one thing day in, day out. I mean, that's very common in a lot of these large corporations is you're hired to do one thing and to specialize in one thing and to do it really well. But months and months of doing the same thing just got really boring to me. And so I started researching and I started looking for maybe other alternatives in terms of making money. And that's when I stumbled across this idea of freelancing. And I was just really attracted to this concept. I was like, okay, great. Like, there's no cap on your income. You have autonomy over your schedule. You have the freedom to choose your hours. You have the freedom to choose the different projects that you work on. Like, that sounds incredible. Like, sign me up. And so, as I was researching and kind of, dipping my toe into this world, I had this client actually reach out to me on LinkedIn, or rather, so I had this prospect just randomly reach out to me on LinkedIn, completely out of the blue. And they were like, "Hey, we need like a freelance PR specialist." And I was like, "Well, I have experience as a public relations specialist at this corporate company. I'm learning the fundamentals. I understand it. Why don't I just transfer that skill set to freelance and just, take all of my knowledge and just package it up as a freelance service?" So I set up a call with them. And just like that, I landed them as a client. So I ended up quoting them like $25 an hour, which I know. At the time, it made sense because I was like, that's roughly what I'm making in my corporate job. I'll just have $25 as my hourly rate. Anyways, landed them as a client, was able to get them a lot of results right out of the gate. They wrote me this fantastic testimonial. I built trust with them. It was fantastic, but it was very, very part time. And so there came a point in my corporate career that I was really bored, and unfortunately, my performance started dropping because I was like, I'm doing the same thing. I'm not learning. I'm not growing. I'm bored. I want to move on. And so it was a nudge from the HR department, they're like, "You have 2 choices. You can either continue on, but you're gonna have to really manage your performance, or you can walk away." And so I decided to walk away. I decided this was the nudge that I needed to quit my 9 to 5. And I saw an opportunity with my freelance client who I got some quick wins. They were really happy with my performance. And I decided, why don't I just pitch them on a monthly retainer and show them that I can provide these additional services? Kind of like what Tyler was saying, is you have this like post college confidence that kind of comes out of nowhere. The world hasn't smacked you in the face yet. And so I was like, what the heck? I'm going to shoot my shot, see what they say. And they ended up saying yes. And so thankfully, I was able to figure it out as I took the leap to get a freelance client that I was able to support myself with.
Yeah, so, you get those first few jobs and they're totally aligned with what you want to do. You enjoy doing the actual skill set involved in your full-time job. But for me, I knew extremely quickly and early that full-time jobs were not for me. I am just mentally incapable of being an employee. I think it's just not something that I'm even able to do without excruciating pain. I always remember those first few months at a new job, you kind of realize, like, oh my God, these days are just dragging on, and time just seems to slow down. And you start wondering, like, is this really what my life is going to look like for the next 10, 15 years as an employee? And this is at a job that most people would say was an amazing opportunity. Like, this wasn't even a soul sucking corporate job. This was at a really cool company with a really cool boss, really cool people around me. So I think, like, really early on if you are meant to be an employee or if you have a more of an entrepreneurial sort of mindset, because working at a 9 to 5 is going to feel like torture for you if you want to be an entrepreneur. And that certainly was for me. And again, these were dream jobs that I was extremely grateful to have. But some people are just wired differently, and I'm definitely wired differently. And I'm just not set up to be a good employee. So how did I get out of my full-time job? What I did was I made sure that I was constantly updating my portfolio. So I went into these jobs as a freelancer. I had a freelancer mindset the entire time. I was a 9 to 5 employee, but I never felt like I wasn't a freelancer at the same time. So every time I got a new project completed, I updated my website. Every single time I learned a new skill, I made sure that it was going to transfer into my freelancing efforts as well. So maybe I was learning how the agency would pitch projects, and I would take notes on that, and I would, you know, try to take in as much relevant information from these jobs as I could. And then, because I knew it was going to be a short period of time and I was going to be out of there and I was going to have to be fending for myself as a full-time freelancer. So build up your portfolio as you're working your 9 to 5. Take in as many skills as you can, leverage this job as much as you can. And you should be freelancing the entire time as well. You should be sending proposals to clients on the side. You should be trying to win work. And when you do win work, do the client work in your spare time. Maybe take a few days off if you actually win a client project. Find a way to do both, because you never want to stop freelancing, even if you have a 9 to 5 job, because you always want that muscle to be getting worked out. You always want to feel like you're an entrepreneur. You always want to feel like you're moving the ball forward in your freelancing career. So that's what I would say is leverage your full-time job as much as you can, constantly update your portfolio. Hopefully you're in a job where everything that you're doing at your job can be applied to your freelancing website or your profile, your online presence. And eventually you're going to get to a point where you feel confident enough with the experience that you have working with clients on the side of your full-time job that, you know what? I'm ready to leave my full-time job and I'm ready to be a full-time freelancer. And so it took me 2 years to get to that point where I felt confident enough in my portfolio. But once it happened, I knew it was going to happen, and I just made the decision without any sort of backtracking. Like I knew this was it. This was my moment. I have some runway in my savings. So that's another key thing. Make sure you have 2 to 3 months at least of expenses ready to go in your savings, and quit your job and get started.
And my advice to new freelancers that are thinking about making the jump is I would highly, highly recommend do what Tyler recommended because you want to be as intentional and strategic, build up that savings, build up that portfolio, have confidence that you can land a freelance client. My experience was just a little bit different. I kind of built the parachute as I took the leap, which I don't always recommend. Sometimes that's just how it happens, but just be prepared to hustle. And so once I landed that first freelance client, that monthly retainer client, thankfully, I was able to cover my financial bases with that, but man, I was hustling. I was hustling and I was doing all of that work that I didn't have time to do in my 9 to 5. So, I was updating my website, I was adding spec work to my portfolio, I was getting as many testimonials as possible. I was prospecting like crazy because now I had the time. I didn't have a 9 to 5. I could do all of those freelancing activities, and that's how you make it work as a freelancer.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I really want to stress here is that you don't want to go full-time freelance until you've validated your ability to win client work. So, like I said, you should be freelancing the entire time you have a full-time job. You should never stop freelancing. The reason for that is because you're validating your offer, you're validating your portfolio, you're validating everything about your freelancing business while you have the safety of a full-time job. So when you do quit your full-time job, roughly, 1 out of 10 pitches that you send are going to close, or, you're keeping track of these stats. You can look at your monthly income as a freelancer and see it start to steady out. You can see that there's consistency in the work coming in as a freelancer. So make sure you validate your ability to win freelance work before you quit your safety of your full-time job.
I remember hearing a piece of advice that has just stuck with me over the years. And I was talking to a hiring manager, and she was saying, from a hiring perspective, you have to choose which side of the train tracks you want to live on. Do you want to go the self employed route, the entrepreneur route, or do you want to go the corporate route? And you might think, right, as a freelancer, oh, I've developed all these skill sets. Even as an entrepreneur, I've built businesses before. Like, I'm so incredibly valuable. From the corporate side of America, they don't view it like that, right? They're trying to hire somebody for a very specific skill set. And unless you're working at a startup or a smaller company, that's not attractive to them. So, even more of an incentive to fully commit to going the self-employed route because it's very unlikely you're going to have a backup option, which is good. That's really good. Some of you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I don't like that pressure. But when there's only one option, you tend to move faster, you tend to hit harder, and you try to exhaust as many resources as you can to really build up your business. And that's really what it takes to be a full time freelancer.
Yeah, and that's why I say, like, you should be freelancing the entire time because you were an entrepreneur from the beginning. Just because you have a 9 to 5 doesn't mean that you stop being a freelancer or you stop being an entrepreneur. This should kind of run through your blood. It should be a part of your DNA. Like, yeah, I have a full-time job, but that's only a means to an end. I'm extracting as much value from this job as I can, and I appreciate the job for what it is, but it's really a means to the end of getting my portfolio and my skills to a level that allows me to have the autonomy of being a full-time freelancer. And let me tell you, nothing is worth the effort more than becoming a full-time entrepreneur, a full-time freelancer. The time freedom that you have to work on your health, the ability to spend your time where you want to spend it, and the sky really is the limit in terms of what you can make as a freelancer, and it's entirely up to you in terms of how can I craft my offer, how many pitches do I should send out, what kind of niches should I go after, and how much effort do I want to put in, or how much time do I want to put in on a daily basis. And it's just so rewarding to see the fruits of your labor pay off. And again, it's something that snowballs over time, especially if you have extremely happy clients on a consistent basis. One client becomes four clients become 10 clients if they're all referring different people to you. And it can really speed up fast on a year by year basis. So the beginning is the hardest part by far. You really gotta I know for me, thinking back to that 9 to 5, I mean, those were some of the most difficult days that I've had to get through. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was really hard for me to get through some of those work days as an employee. And in an upcoming podcast, we're gonna talk about how I actually technically was not a 9 to 5 employee. I was not a W-9. I was technically a 1099 working a 9 to 5 at their office, and that's something that we're gonna tell you got to avoid. But yeah, I had none of the benefits of being an employee in terms of the health benefits, all that, but I had all the downsides of being an employee in terms of where my time had to be spent. So escaping that rat race, escaping that time sink. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Getting out of the time sink of a 9 to 5 is the most important thing that you can do. And I always told myself, like, I would rather make half as much money being a freelancer than make double the money as a 9 to 5 employee who has to come into this office 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Like, I would literally rather just survive than have to do that every day for the rest of my life. And it was worth it. And now I'm at a point where I'm making way more than I could ever make, even at a big wig corporate job. And I'm doing it on half the time that a corporate executive would have to spend. So it is worth the effort. And the journey is, I know they say enjoy the journey, but you really got to try to enjoy the journey, as painful as it might be, because getting to the other side and actually getting to a point where you can support yourself and actually thrive as a freelancer is just an incredible place to be. And that's why we have this channel, because we want to help as many people as we can escape the slavery of their job and get into the freedom of being a full-time freelancer.
Do you hear the conviction in his voice when he's talking about this? And I know some of you are probably like, You guys are being really dramatic, maybe even a little entitled." We understand. We definitely understand. But I think in order to make it as a freelancer, you have to know what life you want to pursue, and you have to hold your standards to a certain point. You get out of life what you put up with, right? And you have to be able to avoid the 9 to 5 like a plague in order to make it as a freelancer. Like, there's no backup option here. There's only one way forward. I mean, I remember the days when Tyler would come home after his 9 to 5, and I could just see it in his face, this lack of joy, this even depression, this sadness, not to be too dramatic. But the other thing I wanted to touch on is there's a lot of gurus out there who talk about an agency model, right? A team model. But one of the best things about being a freelancer is you can maintain high profit margins, right? You're typically not paying a huge team, right? You can stay nimble, you can keep your profit, you don't have to pay a huge amount of money in taxes. And so that's why we preach this freelancing model is you can have a lot of freedom and flexibility, but also make a lot of money at the same time without the headache, without the drama of building out a huge team or a huge agency.
Yeah, that's why we say choose something that you enjoy doing. That's the most important step. And I know there's other people out there that might disagree with that and say, no, you should choose the thing that the market values the most. And there's value to that. But for me personally, I have to enjoy what I'm doing to get good at it, because you have to spend all this time. You have to get extremely good at something. And the only way to do that is to enjoy the grind of getting better. And don't skip that step. Do not skip that step. Make sure that what you're pursuing is something that you enjoy doing, at least to a certain degree.
And listen, like, that's okay if you aren't daydreaming about your skill set. Like when I was starting out in public relations, right? I'm not daydreaming about the next PR strategy or what media placement. That just wasn't me, right? But I loved freelancing. I loved the freedom and flexibility that freelancing allowed me. I also loved the client relationship. Being a trusted go to person for my client was just the most fulfilling and the most rewarding thing about freelancing. So I was able to lean into those aspects and learn to love it while I was able to get results. Because I think you just obviously need the skill sets, right, to get your clients results. But once you're past the point of results, unless you love what you're doing, sure, spend more time researching and strategizing and all of that. But once you got the client's results, you can focus on other aspects of freelancing that you might enjoy a little bit more.
All right, so hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of the stages that you need to go through in order to become a full-time freelancer. Stage one is decide what you want to get good at. Stage two is get the experience that you need. Usually that means you're going to need to get a job but make sure you get the right job that's going to give you the most leverage into your portfolio. And then step three is knowing when you're ready to transition. You'll know you're ready when you can actually win work during your full-time job on a regular basis. And when you see the consistency of your ability to win work improve. And then once you're ready to go full time, the next stage is going from surviving as a freelancer into thriving as a freelancer. And obviously all the content on our page talks about that as well. So if you have any questions on this or anything that we might have missed in this progression, let us know in the comments. Let us know if there's any other topics out there in the world of freelancing that you'd like us to cover. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one.